Tonight on KQED Newsroom, as the risk of wildfires mounts, PG&E shuts off power to hundreds of thousands of customers across the state. Also, we'll hear from two of the candidates in the race to elect San Francisco's top prosecutor. Plus, a new book by journalist and author Erin Carlson explores the inspiring and iconic career of actress Meryl Streep. Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Michael Krasny. And we begin tonight with the unprecedented mass power outages across the state. On Wednesday, PG&E began shutting off power to roughly 800,000 customers in northern and central California. Affected areas include Napa and Sonoma counties, where the Tubbs fire in 2017 decimated neighborhoods like Coffey Park and Santa Rosa. The utility giant shut off power to parts of 34 counties to reduce the risk of wildfires from dry and severe wind conditions. According to CAL FIRE, the majority of the state's most destructive wildfires have happened in October. Joining me now are KQED News weekend anchor Jeremy Siegel and CAL FIRE Division Chief Jonathan Cox. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, I want to begin with you. Give us a sense of how this wildfire season is shaping up compared particularly to last year, the Camp Fire, and now we're broaching November, which was when the Camp Fire broke out in early November.
Yeah, that's right. So in comparison to the last few years, we have experienced under 200,000 acres of land burned in California. This time last year, we were over 1 million acres of land burned. So a relatively mild season in comparison to the last few. Maybe the biggest reason for that is because we have fuel moistures that we haven't had in the past few years. And that's really due to the rain and the moisture that we had late into the year. However, we are now in that time frame that we tend to get the large and destructive fires in California. And as we've seen over the last few days, both in the Bay Area and now in Southern California, some of the larger fires that we fear when these wind events happen are starting to break out.
Yeah, we're still in prime season, but have the power outages actually affected CAL FIRE's ability to monitor and fight fires?
Yeah, so we actually have put a lot of effort into preparing for blackouts ourselves as an agency. Obviously, we have to run our operations, our fire stations, our fire engines, and everybody else throughout the year, even when there's no power. So
let me press you on that. But what about monitoring? I mean, are you better off? For example, if web cameras that stream high fire risk areas are down because they don't have power, doesn't that hinder your ability to quickly respond to a fire?
So we always have a backup is maybe the best way to put it. And whether that be a radio system or some sort of communication that is not based on power and internet, we have that ability. So, you know, we are a redundancy agency when things aren't working at levels that they typically are, and we obviously prepare for them. The cameras that are out in the western U.S., the alert wildfire cameras that are for fire verification, are a tool that are very helpful. If they're not available, then we revert to putting aircraft in the air to see if there's something going on. So it's all about redundancy. This is obviously the largest scale that we've seen for a power outage across the state, and it just means that we've had to revert to the plans that we've been putting in place since the beginning of the year.
Let me go right to Jeremy, because Jeremy's been talking to people in Berkeley and Oakland. A lot of, shall we say, anger and a lot of frustration about these outages. Tell us what you've been hearing.
Yeah, a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And while Jonathan was saying that CAL FIRE has backups in place, a lot of these residents don't have backups in place. And some of that frustration was coming from the fact that the communication from PG&E regarding these blackouts was a little confusing for residents. You know, residents felt that they got a short notice about these blackouts, and then once they were for sure going to be happening in parts of the Bay Area, PG&E directed people to their website. But
which wasn't working a lot.
Exactly, yeah. When people were going online, the website was down, and that made it extremely difficult to find out if your home indeed was going to be losing power. So that was a source of frustration for residents. And then once the power was actually off, you know, PG&E was warning that it could take days to restore it even after the extreme wind event subsides. And you know, for people to be out of power for days, that can be difficult because, you know, food that you have in your fridge, in your freezer, that's going to go bad over that period of time. So frustration all around.
Many difficulties, and particularly with people who need medical devices and who need to be plugged into all kinds of things. But what has been the California Office of Emergency Services role in all this during the power outages? What I mean by that is, did they get any advance warning?
Yeah, so the California Office of Emergency Services does get advance warning, meaning that they're likely finding out about this event a bit before residents in areas that are going to be affected are, so that they can prepare for what's going to happen once power goes off. So in the event of this, you know, they were helping local jurisdictions jurisdictions prepare for the event of a blackout, doing things like, helping local officers get to intersections where the lights are going to be down, to put up temporary stop signs to let people know that they should treat these intersections as a four-way stop. And then they were also doing things like getting information about these centers where people can, go in their communities to charge their phones, to have access to air conditioning. So I was just speaking a little bit earlier today to someone from Cal OES, and he was saying that for them this was their second highest level of emergency, basically, which is pretty close to an all-hands-on-deck situation. It wasn't the level of what we saw last November with the Camp Fire, which is a mass casualty incident, but Cal OES was certainly putting a lot of resources into this.
I'll go back to you, Jonathan. Governor Newsom recently signed 22 bills to not only fight fires but prevent fires. Your thoughts about what actually is in the offing for those bills in terms of helping you?
Yeah, so I
helping
think,
us?
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe the most exciting part about this is we're attacking this problem from all angles right now. This includes everything from the major projects that are going on statewide for vegetation management, as well as new helicopters, additional fire engines, and other things that may not get as much attention are things such as land use planning, right? We have a whole bureau within CAL FIRE now that works with local jurisdictions on land use decisions in very high fire hazard severity zones. So this goes way beyond just the calling of 911 into some much larger meta social issues that really touch on wildfire.
Yeah, speaking of which, how much tougher has your job been because of climate change?
Well, I think it's undoubtedly more difficult. The data and the science reaffirms the wildfire problem based on the changes we're seeing. And I think most important to all of that is the temperatures, and with the temperatures, the change in vegetation, as well as the nighttime temperatures. And when you change the nighttime temperatures higher to what they typically are, our fuel moisture recovery doesn't come through and our fire behavior increases.
So, I ask you, do you have the resources? Does CAL FIRE have the resources to keep up, particularly with all these challenges and what's going on vis-a-vis climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're continually adding to it. And I think we are continually confronting this new normal at every stage that we see. And I think, this increased legislation and all these different actions that are being taken are a very big step in the right direction to really confront this problem head on.
Jeremy, what have we learned, particularly from these outages, about what we need to do about the infrastructure? There's the old saying that this is the fifth wealthiest economy in the world, but we have kind of a third world infrastructure.
Yeah, just like how climate change is looming over all of this, so too a lot of people would say is potential mismanagement by PG&E. And you're seeing in the aftermath of this, or during this, criticism from residents, criticism from local and state lawmakers of the utilities saying that they need to do something to upgrade their infrastructure, to make it so that this is a last resort, so that it's not that we're seeing these massive blackouts that could last days all the time. Extreme fire seasons might be becoming the new normal here. You have lawmakers saying these blackouts can absolutely not become the new normal. So at the same time, I think people had frustration over the fact that they were potentially in areas, especially in the Bay Area, where you might say, I don't have much fire risk where my home is. Why am I losing power when, I'm not in these hills with extreme winds? The problem is that the way that PG&E's infrastructure works is you might have your electricity lines connected to somewhere in the hills where there is more of that risk of extreme winds helping spark a wildfire with their equipment. So because of the way that their infrastructure is set up, you have potentially more widespread blackouts than people would like to see in these situations.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'd like to hear what you have to say about people who are residents worried about, or businesses for that matter, about wildfires. 3 things that they can do.
Yeah, so I think one is we probably have seen the most heightened awareness around wildfires that we've seen probably ever in California right now. The 3 biggest things I would say is, first of all, have a plan. Have a plan to get out of your house with your family, with your neighbors, and ensure that that includes those who may be elderly or have a disability in your area. 2 would be to clear the vegetation around your home, and that is there's no substitute for defensible space. And thirdly is just being hyper aware when you are outdoors in California. 95% of all fires in this state are human caused to some degree, and so we're our own worst enemy when it comes to fire ignition. So that would be my biggest 3 takeaways.
And what about defensible space? I mean, there's a lot of concern, for example, that there may not be enough fire inspectors, particularly in rural areas. Yeah.
I know that is being addressed at the moment at a much higher level as to what is the best way and how we can actually inspect more property statewide. It's without a doubt one of the best things that can be done is that one-on-one contact with homeowners to give them that personalized information about how they can defend their home.
All this anger at PG&E, Jeremy, notwithstanding, you think people are looking towards some kind of serious, profound change, municipalization or, private or ownership of the utility, anything like that?
I do expect when lawmakers return to their next session in Sacramento that there will be conversations about this and about the possibility of different municipalization. There's been talk of San Francisco taking over PG&E's grid here in San Francisco. At the same time, Governor Gavin Newsom in a press conference last night was saying even if you did switch over control of Pacific Gas and Electric to the state, you're still switching over infrastructure that is outdated potentially, or infrastructure that needs a lot of significant work. So even if the executives at PG&E aren't running the utility, there still might be a problem that persists and takes a long time to fix.
Well, we'll have to see where it all goes. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Newsroom. Appreciate you both being here and appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you,
Michael.
Thank you.
In less than 4 weeks, San Francisco voters will head to the polls. In addition to deciding the fate of local measures, they'll also elect the city's next district attorney. It's an open contest with 4 candidates vying to be the city's next top prosecutor. But it's now mired in controversy. Last Friday, San Francisco Mayor London Breed appointed one of those candidates, Suzy Loftus, as interim DA after incumbent George Gascón resigned to explore a run for the DA race in Los Angeles. With us now is the interim district attorney, Suzy Loftus, and one of her rivals in the San Francisco DA race, Chesa Boudin. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Pleased to have you both here. Chesa, I'm going to begin with you because we'll get to the issues here, but how do you react to this interim DA post? Unfair in terms of the electoral process?
Well, Michael, I think the ACLU said it really well when they called on the mayor to withdraw the appointment and to cease and desist her interference with what would have been the first open district attorney's race in 100 years. Voters in San Francisco were excited about having the chance to elect their district attorney on a clean slate, and the mayor's trying to take that away from them.
And if Mayor Breed had appointed you, you would have said no?
Correct.
Absolutely?
Absolutely.
Suzy Loftus, response?
So San Franciscans are concerned about what's happening on their streets. They're concerned about the fact that we've got 70 car break-ins happening every day. So when a vacancy opened up in what's an incredibly important office for our city, the mayor followed her obligation and picked the person who she thought was most experienced and ready for the job. That's me. Change has to start. What we're doing isn't working. And I'm comforted that on November 5th, the people of our city will actually decide who keeps a job. But when I'm called to serve, that's what I'm going to do.
Don't feel you're getting an unfair disadvantage to the other 3 candidates?
I think what I'm getting is another job to do while I'm campaigning. And as a mother of 3, I'm used to having a lot of jobs, and I'm committed to doing it and doing it all well. Let
me ask you, and then I'll ask Chesa, what is the one thing, top priority, that you would change that perhaps didn't do as well under George Gascón as it could have or should have or might have?
I think I've been running for this office for over a year, and I've not only earned the support of the mayor, but 8 members of the Board of Supervisors, because people living and working in San Francisco are fed up. They're fed up with seeing glass on every street from a car break-in. They're fed up with stepping over needles and having a city infrastructure that says there's nothing we can do about it. So what we have to do is get back to bringing neighborhood prosecutors to partner with communities to build safety in San Francisco. People are looking for a change, and the change starts now.
I may want to ask you more about those neighborhood prosecutors, but let me ask Chesa, I mean, from your perspective, what has George Gascón not done that should be done or needs to be done?
Well, we know that George Gascón has done a woefully inadequate job in the face of rising property crime. And the surge in property crime started back when Suzy was on the police commission, and it's continued to this day under George Gascón as district attorney. The other thing that he's failed to do is to prosecute and hold police accountable for use of force, shootings, killings of unarmed civilians. I will say one thing that George Gascón deserves credit for that he often doesn't get credit for is his willingness to file criminal charges against the deputy sheriffs involved in the Fight Club case. And it was a real disappointment to see that the Sheriff's Department legal team, including Suzy, mishandled the evidence in that case, requiring the district attorney to dismiss criminal charges, despite overwhelming evidence that a crime had been committed.
Let me get Suzy to respond to that. Suzy Loftus.
Yeah, this is actually what San Franciscans are rejecting across the board, is Chesa's continuing to think that what people are looking for is the blame game. And if we have someone to blame and find fault, that's enough. San Franciscans are looking for solutions. They're looking for a leader who's got a track record. When I was on the police commission, for the first time in 20 years, I reformed the use of force policy that has resulted in a 30% decrease in injuries in police use of force and a decrease in injuries to officers. What they're looking for is someone who's going to invest in neighborhood prosecutors, deal with some of the civil rights issues that people are feeling and tenants feeling pushed out. It's time for leadership and an approach that is completely different. The status quo is about finding someone to blame. I'm about actually delivering results.
Well, Chesa, what about the concern that many seem to have about you not having done any prosecutions?
Well, I've done more years in the San Francisco Hall of Justice over the last 7 or 8 years than all the other candidates combined. I've tried more than 24 jury trials in front of San Francisco juries. I'm the only candidate who comes at the job with a wide variety of experiences, personal and professional, that none of the other candidates have. I've visited my own parents in prison for my entire life. I've defended people who are wrongly accused of crimes. I've advised people who are guilty that they should plead guilty. And I've worked for 2 federal judges. Here in San Francisco, we presided over more than 9 jury trials. I've seen the criminal justice system from multiple different perspectives. I know it's broken, and I've got a concrete set of proposals for how we can fix it, and I've got a track record of fighting for those changes. This isn't about the blame game, Michael. This is about someone with a track record of standing up for what's just and what makes us safer. Many of the policy proposals that I've made in this campaign, things like bail reform and standing up to the Trump administration around immigration policy, are things that all the other candidates now say they support. I've got a track record of fighting for those changes, and they have a track record of being on the wrong side of them for years and years.
So what do you want to do, Suzy Loftus? What are you particularly, in terms of triage, going to be looking at to change?
We've got to stem the tide of car break-ins. As I said, the latest numbers as of September of this year is that there are 70 per day in San Francisco. A local journalist, I think, just put on Twitter yesterday.
It's actually down from numbers, but it's still too high, obviously.
It's still too high. We're at the top of the FBI's property crime rate per capita, and while we, often talk about property crime, as something that seems to be smaller or minimal, it's affecting people's ability to afford to live in San Francisco. So whether it's retail theft that's happening from small businesses in Chinatown, whether it's package theft that's happening on the west side, whether it is, the sort of retail theft that's happening in mid-market, we have to have a strategy and a plan to work with law enforcement and work with our community members to actually deal with that, and that hasn't been done in the last few years.
What about a plan? Do you have a plan for conservatorships in terms of homelessness? What are you proposing?
I support the expansion of the use of conservatorships. I'm from San Francisco and I'm raising my family here. I've never seen the level of suffering happening on our streets, and it's clear that a number of people are what the legal definition is gravely disabled. So we need to make sure that we can get them the help that they need, and conservatorship is a vehicle, doesn't have to be forever, but to get someone from where they are to being much better. So I did support moving that from the DA's office and taking it out of the criminal setting and putting it in the city attorney's office. And I think we as a system have to work better to make sure that we're getting people the help they need, because that's an important public safety strategy.
Let me ask a final question to both of you, and that is communities of color. How can you work better with them, and how can you really evoke more trust from them, especially in light of the fact that we have about half of those in prison in San Francisco who are of African-American descent, and only 6% of the San Francisco population is African-American?
Yeah, that's what my career has been about. It's what's earned me the support of everyone from Dolores Huerta to Supervisor Shaman Walton to the black firefighters to Officers for Justice. I've had a 15-year career in public safety where I've worked in and with communities of color to build justice, and I'm tremendously grateful to have their support in this race. What I've announced is that I want to have a first ever civil rights unit within the DA's office. We will not build a city that's safe for all of us until we have a justice system that works for all of us, and racial disparities are a clear threat to that. When we have 5% of our population is African American and they're 53% of who's in our jail, we have work to do, and as district attorney, I will work every day to eradicate racial disparities in our criminal justice system.
Let me go to you, Chesa.
Thanks, Michael. Well, racial disparities are a critical and defining feature of the criminal justice system in the United States. In San Francisco, we incarcerate African Americans at a higher rate than any other city in the country. It's a disgrace, and it needs to change. I've announced a comprehensive series of specific policy ideas. They're on my website, and they'll attack racial disparities at every single step of the criminal justice system. Those policies have won me the support of leaders like Felicia Jones, the Latino Democratic Club, and across the country, criminal justice reform leaders John Legend, Sean King, Angela Davis, as well as 5 members of our Board of Supervisors, and Assemblymember Phil Ting. People who know that I've got the ideas, the track record, the vision, and the commitment to make our criminal justice system
Well, I thank you both
for everybody.
and appreciate you both being with us this evening, and good luck to you and campaign hard.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Will do.
Meryl Streep is one of the most celebrated performers of our time. Since her stage debut in 1975, Streep has won 3 Oscars and 21 nominations, making her the most nominated actor in the history of the Academy Awards. And over the years, she has been known for fighting ageism and sexism in Hollywood and for taking on pivotal roles in films like The Bridges of Madison County and The Devil Wears Prada. Writer Erin Carlson spent 9 months researching the traits that have made Meryl Streep such a commanding presence on stage and on screen. Joining me now is author of Queen Meryl, Erin Carlson, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. And Meryl Streep indeed is a leading icon, legendary, as I said. But Queen Meryl, why Queen? Queen of stage and screen, or Queen of more?
I mean, the 21 Oscar nomination says it all, the 3 wins, but there's something regal about her, isn't there? I mean, you see her on the red carpet, accepting awards, Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017, and she has this regal, queenly bearing that I thought was perfect for the title of the book and would also, resonate with fans who look to her as like a Queen Elizabeth type character, larger than life.
Well, she certainly is one of the greatest living actors, although President Trump called her an overrated actress. He says actress, she says actor. I'm wondering, any thoughts about that?
That was, Trump and Twitter is, a toxic mix, and anyone is fair game. And Meryl, in her 2017 speech at the Golden Globes, went after him. She was championing diversity and going after him on his bullying of a Washington Post reporter, a disabled Washington Post reporter, and he responded by calling her the most overrated actress in Hollywood. After that, her fans kind of closed ranks around her because they knew that was patently untrue, and it sort of made her legend grow. It made her legend stronger.
Well, speaking about her legend, this is a book that I would describe as a panegyric. That's a big word, but it's a word that means high praise. And
yes,
she obviously is an icon to you. You adore her. It comes across in your prose. And I'm wondering, was there a danger in maybe writing a piece that's too puffy, making her so regal that it got out of hand for you?
The problem is that she's perfect. For years, she sort of mastered that tightrope of how to be famous. Other people make big mistakes, public gaffes, but she manages to survive it all. Especially starting in the 80s and 90s, she projected the image of the virtuous mother. She can do it all. She's a working mother, has 4 children, this incredible marriage, and she's one of the greatest actors of our lifetimes. So she really knew how to navigate that media persona.
That marriage with sculptor Don Gummer came after she lost a great love of her life, and John Cazale, who played Fredo, of course, in The Godfather, and the adaptation of not only being a mother and having 4 children, 4 pretty, by most standards, good kids. This is pretty anomalous in Hollywood. You don't hear about these happily ever after stories in terms of the real life of actresses of that caliber, if there is indeed anybody of her caliber, though I don't know if I call her perfect, but you're talking about her life being perfect too.
Her life, if by having it all, a great marriage, children, a great career, then her life is pretty perfect. However, what I found was that she's more, yes, she's perfect if you look at her media image, but she's more flawed than you might think.
She's also said, I'm arrogant, and my mother made
Yes.
me arrogant, right?
Well, her mother was a very larger-than-life commercial artist and stay-at-home mom, and she was a central figure in Meryl's life. She told Meryl from a very young age that she could do anything, and Meryl said that as a result she became arrogant, and she really thought that she could do anything and play any role.
What's amazing is the versatility of what she's done throughout her acting career, which you capture in the book, and also the fact that, like many people know, in Mamma Mia, she was singing and she was writing in a lot of scripts and so forth. I'm interested, though, in hearing from you, since you talk about all these movies, what movies that she did, what role that she did, extraordinary range, as I said, are you most passionate about or is most memorable to you? Do you cherish most?
Oh, well, the first Meryl movie I ever saw was The River Wild when I was 13. And I went with my mother, and I was sort of confused because there was a woman in a leading role that a man would have played. The River Wild was her first and last action movie. She got really ripped for it. And she had a stunt double, but she mostly did her own stunts. So, you know, I saw this movie and I was just like, wow, here is a woman in a man's role. It's not Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's not Bruce Willis. So that stuck with me. And then the next Meryl movie that I, you know, really channeled her talent to me that I really loved was The Devil Wears Prada. Because I was working in New York at the time. I was 26, Anne Hathaway's age in the movie, and I just felt that movie. It, you know, got something so right about working for a demanding boss in the media, which I understood, and she played that role effortlessly.
Yeah, it's amazing how effortless she is and how many accents she can do and how many languages she can do. Can you tell the story quickly about Dino De Laurentiis? It opens your book, and it's quite a compelling story.
So Meryl, she's 26. She's out of Yale School of Drama or Yale School of Trauma, however you want to say it. And she decides she maybe wants to be in movies. She's still doing theater, but let me try movies. And she goes into an audition for King Kong, Dino De Laurentiis' remake. He's an Italian producer. Little does he know that she learned Italian at Vassar. So she sits down, and he's sitting there with his son. And he says to his son in Italian, "Why did you bring me this? This is so ugly." She understands every word that he's saying. So she says to him, "Look, this is what you see. This is what you get." And then she gets up and walks out. Yeah. And Jessica Lange takes the role. So, you know, bullet dodged for Meryl, I guess.
But also a story that reveals a great deal about her character, and she did a lot in terms of activism for feminism and feminist principles and ideals, and also against sexism. It's quite a story. Thank you for this book. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
And you can meet Erin and hear more about her new book, Queen Meryl, tomorrow at 1 p.m. at Sweetwater Music Hall in Mill Valley. For more information, visit eventbrite.com. That'll do it for us. As always, you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Michael Krasny. Thanks for joining us.